Hey, so there's a new genre of YouTube videos I want to talk about, and chances are you guys have probably seen some of those. What I'm talking about is this typical video where you get a millennial or maybe Gen Zer basically ranting about how unaffordable their life has become. And sometimes they'll just compile a bunch of TikToks or viral reels from Instagram and just comment on those and provide commentary and kind of agree with the premise of life becoming unaffordable. And so these videos are doing well. They're gathering some serious views. I think the reason why these videos are resonating is because they're tapping into something real. They're tapping into this real growing frustration within our society that the social contract has been broken. Think about it. There's this whole idea, this whole, man, I don't want to use the word psyop, but a psyop of sorts where you had this carrot being dangled in front of you your whole life. Just be a good boy, follow the rules, get good grades in school, listen to your teacher, go to college, maybe become a student athlete so you can get that scholarship to get into that school you always wanted to go to. And a lot of people followed that beaten path, that prescriptive path towards success. And once they finally graduated from their 4-year university and got a job within their field, they discovered that, hold on, how much am I paying in taxes? And well, I'm only making slightly above minimum wage after being in school for 4 years. And they were told, just hold on, hold your horses, tough it out, kid. You got to do your part. You got to stay in the trenches for maybe 3, 4, 5 years, get promoted, and then you're going to get to that highly coveted $100,000. That is the threshold for success, especially growing up. I was looking up to people who made 100K. To me at that time, back in, 2010s, a guy making 100K, that's a baller right there. I wanted to aspire to be like somebody who makes 100K. And then COVID happened and trillions of dollars got printed, inflation skyrocketed. And now people making 100K are scratching their heads saying, well, I can't even afford an entry-level home in a lot of the United States market with this salary. And there was a article that came out fairly recently basically stating that the new poverty line for a family of 4 should be $140,000. Now that number shocked a lot of people because the current federal poverty line for a family of 4 is about $32,000. And so there's a big disconnect. And, there's a bunch of people that came out and said, look, I'm a single guy, I'm making 80K and I feel fine. But the author really doubled down on that criticism and he said, yeah, as a single person, you can get by making 80K, but a family of 4, so 2 adults and 2 young children, you got to think about the affordability of housing, affordability of that extra room for the kids. You got to factor in the childcare costs that are skyrocketing, in some cases $1,000, $2,000 a month. We can argue about where the federal poverty line should be. That's not the point. The point is that there's this general sense, this general disillusionment with where things stand in terms of affordability and in terms of the social contract. And you're seeing a lot more populism or populist-like tendencies within our society. If you look at the New York mayoral race, I know, people are very polarized on these political issues. Bottom line is when you start looking at the slogans during the campaign, there was a lot of talk about universal basic income. There was a lot of talk about rent controls and things of that nature, things that were pretty fringe back in the day, but now are getting onto the mainstream agenda for Democrats. And when you look at Republicans, things are also leaning towards more extreme populist type of tendencies. The MAGA movement kind of taking over and taking roots in the country, but now it's getting fractured, and there's this fraction of the right that is leaning towards America first, gaining more populist energy, more populist slogans as well, getting further away from the center. People are really seeking someone with a solution. People are looking towards a strong leader who will come in and say, I've got this, I've got a plan, I'm going to implement this. They're looking for a simple fix. And that's where things get dangerous as we look forward. And then you are looking at the biggest wealth transfer in history that is about to happen. So if you look at boomers, they make up about 20% of the United States population, but they hold over half of the United States household wealth. And as these boomers age, it's just, life takes its course. Some of these boomers will start passing away, and their heirs, their kids, will inherit their wealth. Now, this inheritance will really be a lifeline for a lot of people my age. But the problem is that a lot of millennials will not get a significant inheritance, and a lot of them will get no inheritance at all. And so
you guys are getting paid?
This divide between the haves and the have-nots will continue to widen. So when you start looking at all these variables, from the rise of populism to this real affordability crisis that we're experiencing to projected AI labor market disruptions, boomers leaving disproportionate amounts of inheritance to their heirs, the worst case scenario is real dystopian, right? We could slide into a new tech feudalism where, similar to the medieval feudal system where you had the haves and the have-nots, we'll have asset holders and, forever renters, W-2 employees that are just working to keep the lights on. And I think we're on a trajectory towards that outcome, right? So what's the practical takeaway? You can say, man, there's a lot of doom and gloom. I'm already stressed out. What can I do? The key is to understand historical cycles. And it's important to understand where we are in terms of our debt cycle as a country, as a nation. It's important to understand where we are within the geopolitical realm, right? The shifting polarity of the world powers, the multipolar world that we're entering. And taking a look at, what is the only way this debt burden that we are carrying, our national debt, what is the only way it can be resolved? And the answers are in history, and the answer is currency debasement, right? So there's a lot of money printing on the horizon, a lot of money printing that is going to happen in the future to deal with the increasing burden of the interest rates on our ever-increasing national debt. And so what that tells me is that you have to position yourself to benefit from this debasement happening. There's a number of ways to do it, but it all boils down to one simple thesis, and that is become an asset holder, right? Whether it's real estate, whether it's precious metals like gold and silver, those have done phenomenal over the course of last year. Bitcoin could potentially become one of those assets. I'm not super strong on that, but it's worth having some sort of exposure. I mean, really, the answer is to diversify along multiple asset classes, because you never know which one will be the winner. If the real estate somehow becomes affordable, maybe you want to have exposure to precious metals, to the equities, to Bitcoin. So diversifying, working towards really gathering your assets, but also understanding that there's no such thing as a safe job. There's no such thing as a safe W-2 paycheck in the world of AI. So consider a side hustle, a business idea, generating multiple income streams if possible. If not, just continue stacking your skills within the area that you're already working in as a W-2 employee. Maybe get that extra certificate to stand out, maybe stack certain skills to make you more attractive and marketable in the marketplace, because the competition is just only going to increase with the introduction of AI. So those are the common sense things you could do in light of new realities. And, you can complain all you want about the changing world order, about the state of the economy, but what is within your control? What are the variables that you can control to safeguard you and your family to the best of your ability? I think it's the steps that I outlined. Let me know what you guys think is the best course of action moving forward. What do you think about affordability crisis? What do you think about home ownership in 2026? And where do you think the markets are headed? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.